Anycubic has finally released their largest CoreXY 3D printer, and this thing is seriously impressive for its size. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dan, and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're looking at the wonderful Anycubic S1 Max. Now, I'm a big fan of large format 3D printers, since bigger always means better. And since this has arrived, I've been putting it through its paces and testing it to see what it can really do. This combo retails for $799, which is absolutely phenomenal. I want to quickly say that this video is not sponsored by Anycubic. They simply sent me this printer and asked me to make a review on it. All thoughts and opinions are my own. So to get started, the setup on this 3D printer is very quick and straightforward and really only requires a few minutes of your time. After removing the cardboard packaging, foam inserts, and some tape, I cut the zip ties holding the gantry and wooden shipping spacer in place. From there, I removed the Ace 2 Pro, the plastic support brackets, and unlocked the heat bed by removing the 3 transport screws. Next, I installed the activated carbon pack into the compartment on the back of the 3D printer, and then I attached the filament hub module with 2 screws on the back, and then connected the 4 PTFE tubes from the Ace 2 Pro to the bottom. After plugging the Ace 2 Pro into the printer with the included cable, that's pretty much it. I then powered the printer on, followed the startup instructions, connected it to Wi-Fi, and used the Anycubic app to scan the QR code and bind the printer to my account. The calibration and self-check process took about 10 to 15 minutes, and after that, I was ready to start printing. Now, I'm going to quickly run through the specs for the Anycubic S1 Max. It's a fully enclosed CoreXY 3D printer that offers a 350mm cubed build volume, which means the build volume is 174% larger than its predecessor, the Kobra S1. This printer also includes flow calibration and vibration compensation to help improve the print quality while reducing ringing and ghosting in your prints. The S1 combo comes with the Ace 2 Pro filament management system. It functions as both a filament dryer and filament management system, allowing for 4 multicolor 3D printing right out of the box. Inside the Ace 2 Pro, there is a humidity and temperature sensor, as well as an RFID system that automatically recognizes the Anycubic filament you put into it. And if you're completely insane, you can add 3 additional Ace 2 Pros to expand it up to 16 multicolor 3D printing. For my very first print, I started with the classic Benchy. This took about 40 minutes using Anycubic's orange PLA with completely stock slicer settings. The finished print looks super clean with very smooth surfaces and consistent layer lines throughout. The hull line was visible, but aside from that, the Benchy came out exactly how I'd want a first print to look. The overhangs printed nicely, and overall it was a solid start. There's no major inconsistencies or any issues with this print. It looks pretty nice. However, the regular Benchy did feel a bit small for this 3D printer, so I scaled it up to 560% and printed it. Using the same orange PLA, this monster took roughly 19 hours to print. It features some pretty aggressive overhangs and required printing sections at nearly 90-degree overhangs. Other than reducing the infill to save material, I left everything at the default slicer settings. The finished model actually exceeded my expectations. Aside from the hull line and a few minor overhang imperfections, the print quality was excellent considering the size of this model. I genuinely didn't expect it to come out this clean. And the size difference between the two is actually pretty incredible. The hull line is pretty noticeable, but other than that, it's extremely smooth and just looks pretty dang cool. Absolutely solid test. Next, I wanted to max out the build plate and test a very large-scale flexible model. I printed this in a glittery green PLA, and it took about 9 hours to complete. It was very easy to pop off the build plate and had no issues. The surface and layer quality was excellent across the entire model. Every segment moved freely and all of the linkages worked exactly as intended. It flexes and moves properly with no issues, and the final print length is just over 3 feet. I'm extremely happy with how this came out. In order to test the consistency and multicolor aspects of this 3D printer, I decided to print 42 flexible beavers that stretched the entire build plate. And the entire print took around 19 hours and used about 315 grams total of filament. All 42 beavers printed successfully with no failures, layer shifts, or extrusion issues. They released from the build plate super easily, flexed as intended, and looked remarkably consistent across the entire bed. The color changes were also very clean. I didn't notice any color bleeding or filament swap issues, which was really great to see. All of these little guys look identical to each other and came out looking pretty great. Overall, I'm very happy with these. Unfortunately, I did run into one failure across my entire testing. I attempted to print a giant multicolor flexible beaver, and about 4 hours into the print, the machine reported a motor operation fault. I'm not entirely sure what caused this error to occur. However, after restarting the 3D printer, this error never returned. The articulation worked properly and the color swaps were being handled correctly before the print stopped. It does suck, but overall it still flexes and the multicolor printed just fine. Moving on, I found these little see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil alien guys that needed multicolor 3D printing. And because this 3D printer is big, I scaled them up to fit the entire build plate. This took about 17 hours and came out looking pretty decent. There was some very light stringing on the purge tower and a few spots on the model themselves. The extremely impressive part was the supports practically fell off on their own and left behind very clean contact points. I didn't have to apply any pressure, I could simply pop them off with my hands. I did notice some visible Z-banding in certain areas, and I also probably should have moved the Z-seam to the back because it ended up being visible on their faces. Still, despite these minor issues, they came out looking pretty great, and they're some of my favorite prints from all of the testing. To test the entire 350mm cubed build volume and the flatness of the bed, I decided to print this massive bamboo vase. I printed this model in vase mode, which means it only had 3 bottom layers and a single wall, yet it still measured nearly the full size of the entire build plate. This print only took 4 hours, and once it was done, it released from the build plate very easily. The first layer quality across the entire footprint was excellent, and aside from a few tiny imperfections and some plastic that was left behind from previous prints, the bottom surface looked fantastic. The layer line visibility was very minimal, which is impressive considering the size of the print and the fact that it was only 1 wall thick. Honestly, I was expecting a few more imperfections for this entire print, however, it came out looking pretty great. Next, I decided to print this Dr. Doom mask that was modeled by my buddy Vec3D. I wanted to see how well the printer would handle the overhangs and to see what the overall quality of the finished print would look like. This print took around 9 hours using the stock settings on the slicer and came out looking fantastic. The supports easily popped off and left behind extremely clean surfaces. For a wearable prop straight off the printer, the results were excellent, and this would require very little cleanup before moving into sanding and finishing. As someone who prints a lot of props and cosplays, this print quality is very nice for post-processing work. Now, I'm not much of a PETG or ABS guy. I typically stick to PLA, since her and I are pretty good friends. With that being said, Anycubic does advertise that this 3D printer can handle higher temperature filaments, so I decided to test PETG and ABS. The PETG benchy took around 42 minutes and came out with a really glossy finish. It was honestly one of the cleaner PETG benchies I have ever printed. There was no major errors with it other than some slight Z-banding. The ABS benchy finished in around 45 minutes and produced very similar results. The hull line was noticeably more visible though, but aside from that, the overhangs were very clean and the layers looked extremely consistent. And this is exactly what I would expect from a fully enclosed machine like this that can handle higher temperature filaments. And after a few weeks of testing, I've come away very impressed with the Anycubic S1 Max combo. The setup on this 3D printer was pretty easy and straightforward. The print quality on everything that I printed was consistently good, and whether I printed something super small or extremely large that filled up the entire build plate, I was very impressed with the results. Aside from that single motor fault that occurred during testing, I didn't encounter any other issues. The S1 Max is fast, reliable, and pretty easy to use. And currently, this retails for $799. And this includes the Ace 2 Pro, which is a filament management system and filament dryer. I'd say it's a pretty fair price. So if you're looking for a large format CoreXY fully enclosed 3D printer that has multicolor capabilities, I'd say this would be a great printer for you. As someone who spends most of his time making helmets, props, and cosplay, I can say that a large 3D printer is exactly what I want, and I will definitely be using this going forward. I want to give a massive thank you to Anycubic for sending me this 3D printer, and thank you guys for watching this video. I'll have links in the description below if you're interested in checking it out, and I'll see you in the next one.